Now we're joined by political analyst Lukhona Mnguni to delve into this matter a little bit deeper. Thank you so much, Lukhona. And again, SG has been in this space. It is his forte, being part of the election planning committee and also the drive to just galvanize as much votes to the ANC as possible.
No, absolutely. And I mean, you can see his commitment to getting the ANC machinery in motion and oiling it properly. I mean, the Youth League held its Congress just not so long ago, and the Women's League, of course, was meant to sit its conference this weekend, but it was postponed to next weekend. The Western Cape has finally set its own provincial conference. So he's really trying to make sure that, you know, he's running a solid entity with great mandates from constituencies to ensure that they contest for 2024. And of course, 2024 is going to be an important election, not only because of some predictions and polls and surveys that, predict that the ANC might get below 50%, but precisely because South Africa's democracy turns 30 in 2024. So it's a significant milestone, and I think that, the ANC would want to unwrite the story of liberation movements that lose power at about plus minus 20 years after, liberation. And therefore, for Fikile Mbalula, I suppose it's a number of considerations. So it's that, he's the SG, so he wants the party machinery well-oiled. But of course, I'm probably thinking he might have his eye on the mark in terms of now that we've done 2022, there's 2027 coming for the ANC's own elective conference. And if he can deliver an ANC victory as SG, what could stop him becoming president if he wanted to?
Yes, but the litmus test, I think, for the ANC has always been about the lack of implementation of some of the great policies that they have, including that of the economic transformation and creating an equal or egalitarian society. He touched on how they're going to revisit, I suppose, the black economic empowerment, employment equity policies, because that is the crux of the matter, is the fact that the true living conditions haven't really improved for the majority black, and the middle class has only maybe grown by a very thin margin.
Well, and I mean, supposedly what we mean by middle class is also a very, very big debate in South Africa, because if you look at the income scales that are said to be formulating the middle class, you realize whether if a person earning 15,000 rands a month actually does qualify to be called middle class. But of course, wages are so low as well in South Africa. But I think that the track record of the ANC in government is quite appalling. There's great dilapidation, whether it's infrastructure. I mean, the fact that people, he touched on his role as Minister of Transport, but during COVID, people could actually build houses on top of railway tracks. I don't think there's any symbolism of decay than that, where people actually occupy what is meant to be infrastructure that transports goods, transports people, and they build houses on top of it. There's no symbolism for me of the decay further than that. I mean, you've got roads, you've got water, you've got network infrastructure and so on that is significantly decaying. And therefore, the ANC, yes, of course, some people will say, look, we didn't have electricity, so I've got electricity in my home, despite load shedding, but I've got electricity. Some people have water, some people have houses and so on. But we've got to look at the big picture. Yes, at a granular level, some people's lives might have changed, but how does the big picture look in terms of us being able to predict the future of South Africa? And currently, it looks quite gloomy.
Looking quite gloomy, but we see on social media with young people in the main saying the 2024 is going to be the new 1994. Now, if you remember 1994, many of us who are of age had the experience of voting in the first democratically elected process, where you have the serpentine queues. I think it was a 3-day process, excitement and aspirations abound, that if the ANC doesn't pull it together, there is a reality or potential for them not to be in government, or at least in a coalition government at a national level. Your view?
Well, look, 1994 is a breakthrough moment, and so some people are beginning to position 2024 as a potential breakthrough moment from a corrupt government, a government that has lost sight of the vision of South Africa, a government that is failing South Africans and leaving them in the dark for hours on end, and a government that seems not to be in command of its own processes, and a government that shows a lack of consequences from those who do wrong. I mean, you would remember a few weeks back, Chief Justice Raymond Zondo saying that he doesn't believe Parliament is doing enough about the outcomes of the Zondo Commission. So you are in that environment, and people are looking at, and I think for the first time, people are beginning to question their socio-economic lived experiences and tying them up to the vote and saying that I'm going to use my vote as a protest of how I feel, as a protest of how I'm being treated by this state. And I think it cuts across class groups, as you were saying, the middle class. I mean, if you look at the interest rates from the Reserve Bank trying to manage inflation, and you compound those increasing interest rates and the reality of inflation, everybody is feeling the pressure, and I think that that's why some people might be saying 2024 is their 1994.
We also heard SG, and I think it was earlier with the NEC meetings, the irregular updates, saying that, well, to paraphrase, there were splinter groups that were formed because of the ANC policies and taking a jab at the EFF that their economic freedom was essentially a policy of the ANC, and that the ANC is the originator, if you like, of being a leader of society.
Well, if you go back to the ANC Youth League Congress in 2011 at Gallagher, they then adopt, well, with Julius Malema as president of the Youth League then, they adopt this pathway to economic freedom in our lifetime. And, well, whether or not they are the originators, the truth of the matter is that politically speaking, the EFF are the owners of the narrative of economic freedom. And I wonder if that horse hasn't bolted. So you can take a jab at them, it doesn't matter. But they are called the economic freedom fighters, and they have championed these 7 cardinal pillars which are born out of that Congress of the Youth League in 2011. However, politically, people will profit from a number of events. The truth is that whether it originates within the ANC or not, Julius and them were part of those originators, and therefore why would they then lose sight of that which they wanted to champion within the ANC and then not champion it when they've been expelled out of the ANC? So it's semantics, and I think actually the ANC is getting distracted, including the Youth League, that they want to try and recapture the South African imagination that they are the founders and originators and advocates of this mission. I think that horse politically has bolted.
All right. Your predictions, polls, if you may put your head on the block.
Look, I think if there were to be an election tomorrow, the ANC would probably win that election. I think something that needs to shift within the political landscape is those people who used to vote for the ANC needing some alternative to vote for. Because what you need is not for dissatisfied ANC voters to stay at home. You actually need them to come to the polls and vote differently. And there's this big question of whether or not there is an alternative in the country. And I think some people are not quite convinced about the menu of choices and options that's out there.
Yeah, well, we're looking forward to many, many other manifestos, of course, and conferences still to come. Lukhona, it's been a privilege. Thank you so much for joining us. Political analyst Lukhona Mnguni giving us an analysis of what transpired earlier on with the ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula at Luthuli House, reflecting on the NEC's meeting and the progress thereof, including the elections manifesto.